Marcus Chen had owned the Golden Harvest Cafe for nearly 15 years. The small establishment sat on a busy corner in the heart of downtown, where businessmen grabbed their morning coffee and tourists stopped for lunch. The cafe had exposed brick walls, mismatched wooden chairs, and a chalkboard menu that Marcus updated every morning with his own handwriting. He took pride in every detail, from the locally sourced ingredients to the fresh flowers on each table. On this particular Tuesday morning, the cafe was buzzing with its usual crowd. The espresso machine hissed rhythmically as Marcus moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency. His two employees, Sarah and Tom, worked alongside him, taking orders and delivering plates of food to hungry customers. The smell of fresh bread and brewing coffee filled the air, mixing with the sound of conversation and clinking cutlery. Marcus had always been particular about his establishment. He had rules, some written and some unwritten. No outside food. No smoking anywhere near the entrance. And most importantly, proper attire required. He believed that maintaining standards kept his cafe respectable and attracted the right kind of clientele. Over the years, he had turned away people in gym clothes, beachwear, and once even someone in a Halloween costume who had forgotten to change. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, the bell above the door chimed. Marcus looked up from the cappuccino he was preparing to see a young man entering the cafe. The visitor wore a distinctive uniform that Marcus did not immediately recognize. It was deep navy blue with gold buttons and red trim along the collar and cuffs. The fabric looked expensive and well-tailored, fitting the man's athletic frame perfectly. On his chest were several medals and insignia that caught the morning light streaming through the windows. The young man appeared to be in his mid-20s, with close-cropped dark hair and an upright posture that spoke of military training. His boots were polished to a mirror shine and white gloves were tucked neatly into his belt. He carried himself with quiet confidence as he approached the counter, his eyes scanning the menu board with interest. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The uniform, whatever it represented, looked too formal, too costume-like for his taste. He had seen his share of people trying to make statements with their clothing, and he was not interested in turning his cafe into some kind of political stage or attraction. The establishment was neutral ground, a place where people came for good food and pleasant atmosphere, not to display their affiliations or make bold statements. The young man reached the counter and smiled politely. His expression was friendly and open, showing no hint of arrogance or expectation of special treatment. He studied the menu one more time before speaking. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus could not quite place. "I would like to order the breakfast special, please. And a black coffee." Marcus did not move to write down the order. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest and fixed the young man with a stern look. Several customers at nearby tables had paused their conversations, sensing tension in the air. "I am sorry," Marcus said, his tone flat and businesslike. "We have a dress code here. No costumes or theatrical dress allowed. You will need to change into regular clothes if you want to be served." The young man's smile faded slightly. Confusion crossed his features as he glanced down at his uniform, then back up at Marcus. "I apologize if there is a misunderstanding," he said carefully. "This is not a costume. This is my official uniform. I'm on duty." Marcus shook his head firmly. "Uniform, costume, it makes no difference to me. Those are the rules of this establishment. I do not allow people dressed in attention-seeking outfits to dine here. It disrupts the atmosphere and makes other customers uncomfortable." A few people at the tables exchanged glances. Sarah, who was wiping down a nearby counter, froze and looked between her boss and the uniformed visitor with growing concern. Tom, carrying a tray of dirty dishes to the kitchen, slowed his pace to listen. The young man straightened his shoulders, and his expression shifted from confused to disappointed. "Sir, I mean no disrespect to your establishment," he said, maintaining his polite tone despite the rejection. "I have been on duty since 5 this morning and will not be relieved until this evening. I only wished to have breakfast during my authorized break." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to walk around dressed like that," Marcus replied, his voice growing sharper. "There are plenty of other places you can go. This cafe maintains certain standards, and I will not compromise them for anyone." The silence in the cafe had become thick and uncomfortable. Several customers had stopped eating entirely, watching the exchange with varying expressions of surprise, disapproval, and curiosity. An elderly woman at a corner table whispered something to her companion, shaking her head. The young man stood still for a long moment, his face carefully neutral. Marcus could see the discipline in how he controlled his reaction, neither arguing further nor showing anger. Finally, the visitor nodded once, a stiff, formal gesture. "I understand," he said quietly. "I apologize for any inconvenience." He turned on his heel with military precision and walked toward the door. His posture remained perfectly straight, but Marcus noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. The bell chimed again as he pushed open the door and stepped back out into the morning sunshine. As soon as the door closed, the cafe erupted in a low buzz of conversation. Marcus heard fragments of what people were saying, and not all of it was supportive. "Did you see those medals?" one man muttered to his breakfast companion. That was clearly some kind of military uniform. "Maybe he is just a security guard," someone else suggested. "Whatever he was, that seemed harsh," a woman's voice added. Sarah approached the counter, her face troubled. "Marcus, are you sure about that? His uniform looked really official." "Maybe we should have—" "I run this cafe, Sarah, not you." Marcus interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "I make the rules and everyone follows them equally. No exceptions." Sarah bit her lip but nodded and returned to her work. Marcus went back to making coffee, but he could feel the eyes of his customers on him. The comfortable atmosphere of the cafe had shifted, becoming cooler and more guarded. What Marcus did not know was that the young man he had just turned away was Lieutenant James Morrison, a member of the Royal Guard assigned to protect visiting dignitaries during an important state visit. The uniform was not a costume, but an official dress uniform worn only on special ceremonial duties. And while Marcus went about his day thinking the incident was closed, Lieutenant Morrison was returning to his post with a story that would travel quickly through the ranks. By lunchtime, the cafe had returned to its normal rhythm, and Marcus had pushed the morning's confrontation to the back of his mind. He had no way of knowing that his decision to refuse service would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything he believed about respect, authority, and the consequences of judgment. Lieutenant James Morrison returned to his post outside the Grand Imperial Hotel with an empty stomach and a story that immediately caught the attention of his fellow guardsmen. He had not intended to make a big deal of the incident, but when his commanding officer, Captain David Reynolds, noticed that he had skipped breakfast, James felt obligated to explain. "A cafe owner refused to serve me." "Sir," James said simply, standing at attention. "He said my uniform was a costume and violated his dress code." Captain Reynolds, a veteran of 23 years in the Royal Guard, raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Which cafe was this?" "The Golden Harvest, sir. About 3 blocks from here on Merchant Street." The captain's expression hardened. "And you explained that you were on official duty?" "Yes, sir." He was not interested in listening. He said I was seeking attention and disrupting his atmosphere. Word spread quickly through the guard unit stationed around the hotel. By noon, every member of the regiment knew about the incident. Some laughed it off as the ignorance of a civilian who did not understand military tradition. Others felt it was a deeper sign of disrespect, not just to James personally, but to everything the uniform represented. Sergeant Patricia Cole, who had served in the Guard for 15 years, was particularly offended. "That uniform has been worn for over 200 years, she told a group of junior officers during their lunch break. "Men and women have died wearing those colors, and some cafe owner treats it like a cheap Halloween costume." The younger guards listened intently. Many of them had joined the Royal Guard specifically because of its history and prestige. The uniform was not just clothing to them. It represented sacrifice, duty, and honor. To have it dismissed so casually felt like a personal insult. Captain Reynolds reported the incident up the chain of command, as protocol required whenever a guardsman faced discrimination or disrespect while in uniform. The report reached Colonel Margaret Hamilton by early afternoon. The colonel, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, read the account with growing displeasure. "This Marcus Chen," she said to her aide. "Does he have any idea what he has done?" "Apparently not, ma'am," the aide replied. According to Lieutenant Morrison, the owner seemed to think the uniform was some kind of attention-seeking costume. Colonel Hamilton set down the report and steepled her fingers thoughtfully. "The Royal Guard has served this nation for generations. We have protected kings and queens, prime ministers and presidents. We have stood watch during wars and peacetimes. And now a cafe owner believes he can dismiss one of our officers like a street performer? What would you like to do, ma'am? The colonel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I think it is time Mr. Chen received an education about respect and the meaning of service. Assemble the full ceremonial regiment for tomorrow morning. We will pay a visit to his establishment. Back at the Golden Harvest Cafe, Marcus had already forgotten about the incident with the uniformed man. The lunch rush had been busy, and he was focused on managing his staff and keeping customers happy. A food critic from the local newspaper had stopped by, and Marcus had made sure everything was perfect. The review would be published on Friday, and he hoped it would bring in even more business. Sarah, however, had not forgotten. During a quiet moment in the afternoon, she pulled out her phone and did some research. It took her less than 10 minutes to find images of the Royal Guard ceremonial uniform. When she saw the navy blue fabric, gold buttons, and red trim, her stomach sank. "Oh no," she whispered to herself. She showed the images to Tom, who whistled low. "That is the guy from this morning." Marcus turned away someone from the Royal Guard. "Should we tell him?" Sarah asked nervously. Tom shook his head. "What good would it do now? The guy's gone. Maybe nothing will come of it." But both of them felt uneasy for the rest of the day. They had seen the medals on the young man's chest, the discipline in his bearing. This was not someone playing dress-up. This was a professional soldier in official uniform, and their boss had treated him like a troublemaker. As evening fell and the cafe began to empty, Marcus tallied up the day's receipts with satisfaction. It had been a profitable Tuesday, and the weather forecast promised good conditions for the rest of the week. He was already planning the special menu for the weekend, thinking about a new dessert that would impress his regular customers. "Good work today, everyone," he called out to Sarah and Tom as they cleaned tables and prepared to close. "Same time tomorrow." "Marcus," Sarah ventured carefully, "about that man this morning. I looked up some information and I think—" "Sarah, it is done," Marcus interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "I made a decision based on my policy. The cafe has standards. Do not worry about it." Sarah exchanged a glance with Tom but said nothing more. She finished wiping down tables and gathered her things to leave. As she walked home that evening, she could not shake the feeling that something bad was coming. She had seen the look on the uniformed man's face when Marcus refused him service. It was not anger. It was disappointment. And somehow that seemed worse. Meanwhile, at the Royal Guard headquarters, preparations were already underway. Colonel Hamilton had made her decision, and when the colonel made a decision, things happened quickly. Orders went out to every member of the ceremonial regiment. Uniforms were pressed to perfection. Boots were polished until they gleamed. Ceremonial swords were cleaned and sharpened. Medals were arranged precisely on each chest. Captain Reynolds briefed his officers on the plan. Tomorrow morning at 0900 hours, the entire ceremonial regiment will assemble outside the Golden Harvest Cafe. We will be in full dress uniform with all honors. This is not a protest. This is not a demonstration. This is a statement about respect and recognition. "What exactly are we doing, sir?" one young lieutenant asked. "We are going to show Mr. Chen exactly who he turned away. We are going to give him an education he will not forget. And we are going to do it with the dignity and discipline that our uniform represents." The officers nodded. They understood. This was not about revenge or punishment. It was about teaching a lesson in the most powerful way possible, by showing up in force and demonstrating exactly what the uniform meant. Lieutenant Morrison, when informed of the plan, felt conflicted. He had not wanted to cause trouble. He had simply been hungry and looking for breakfast. But he also understood why his superiors were taking this action. The uniform meant something. Service meant something. And sometimes civilians needed to be reminded of the sacrifices that men and women in uniform made every day. That night, as Marcus Chen locked up his cafe and went home to his comfortable apartment, he had no idea that tomorrow would be unlike any other day in his 15 years of business. He did not know that social media was already buzzing with posts about the incident, shared by customers who had witnessed the morning's confrontation. He did not know that local news stations had gotten wind of the story and were preparing coverage. He went to bed satisfied with his day, confident in his decisions and completely unaware that before 24 hours had passed, his cafe would be at the center of a situation that would force him to confront his own prejudices and assumptions. The Royal Guard was coming, and they were bringing a message that Marcus Chen was not prepared to receive. Lieutenant James Morrison returned to his post outside the Grand Imperial Hotel with an empty stomach and a story that immediately caught the attention of his fellow guardsmen. He had not intended to make a big deal of the incident, but when his commanding officer, Captain David Reynolds, noticed that he had skipped breakfast, James felt obligated to explain. "A cafe owner refused to serve me." "Sir," James said simply, standing at attention. "He said my uniform was a costume and violated his dress code." Captain Reynolds, a veteran of 23 years in the Royal Guard, raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Which cafe was this?" "The Golden Harvest, sir. About 3 blocks from here on Merchant Street." The captain's expression hardened. "And you explained that you were on official duty?" "Yes, sir." He was not interested in listening. He said I was seeking attention and disrupting his atmosphere. Word spread quickly through the guard unit stationed around the hotel. By noon, every member of the regiment knew about the incident. Some laughed it off as the ignorance of a civilian who did not understand military tradition. Others felt it was a deeper sign of disrespect, not just to James personally, but to everything the uniform represented. Sergeant Patricia Cole, who had served in the Guard for 15 years, was particularly offended. "That uniform has been worn for over 200 years, she told a group of junior officers during their lunch break. "Men and women have died wearing those colors, and some cafe owner treats it like a cheap Halloween costume." The younger guards listened intently. Many of them had joined the Royal Guard specifically because of its history and prestige. The uniform was not just clothing to them. It represented sacrifice, duty, and honor. To have it dismissed so casually felt like a personal insult. Captain Reynolds reported the incident up the chain of command, as protocol required whenever a guardsman faced discrimination or disrespect while in uniform. The report reached Colonel Margaret Hamilton by early afternoon. The colonel, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, read the account with growing displeasure. "This Marcus Chen," she said to her aide. "Does he have any idea what he has done?" "Apparently not, ma'am," the aide replied. According to Lieutenant Morrison, the owner seemed to think the uniform was some kind of attention-seeking costume. Colonel Hamilton set down the report and steepled her fingers thoughtfully. "The Royal Guard has served this nation for generations. We have protected kings and queens, prime ministers and presidents. We have stood watch during wars and peacetimes. And now a cafe owner believes he can dismiss one of our officers like a street performer? What would you like to do, ma'am?" The colonel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I think it is time Mr. Chen received an education about respect and the meaning of service. Assemble the full ceremonial regiment for tomorrow morning. We will pay a visit to his establishment." Back at the Golden Harvest Cafe, Marcus had already forgotten about the incident with the uniformed man. The lunch rush had been busy, and he was focused on managing his staff and keeping customers happy. A food critic from the local newspaper had stopped by, and Marcus had made sure everything was perfect. The review would be published on Friday, and he hoped it would bring in even more business. Sarah, however, had not forgotten. During a quiet moment in the afternoon, she pulled out her phone and did some research. It took her less than 10 minutes to find images of the Royal Guard ceremonial uniform. When she saw the navy blue fabric, gold buttons, and red trim, her stomach sank. "Oh no," she whispered to herself. She showed the images to Tom, who whistled low. "That is the guy from this morning." Marcus turned away someone from the Royal Guard. "Should we tell him?" Sarah asked nervously. Tom shook his head. "What good would it do now? The guy's gone. Maybe nothing will come of it." But both of them felt uneasy for the rest of the day. They had seen the medals on the young man's chest, the discipline in his bearing. This was not someone playing dress-up. This was a professional soldier in official uniform, and their boss had treated him like a troublemaker. As evening fell and the cafe began to empty, Marcus tallied up the day's receipts with satisfaction. It had been a profitable Tuesday, and the weather forecast promised good conditions for the rest of the week. He was already planning the special menu for the weekend, thinking about a new dessert that would impress his regular customers. "Good work today, everyone," he called out to Sarah and Tom as they cleaned tables and prepared to close. "Same time tomorrow." "Marcus," Sarah ventured carefully, "about that man this morning. I looked up some information and I think—" "Sarah, it is done," Marcus interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "I made a decision based on my policy. The cafe has standards. Do not worry about it. Sarah exchanged a glance with Tom but said nothing more. She finished wiping down tables and gathered her things to leave. As she walked home that evening, she could not shake the feeling that something bad was coming. She had seen the look on the uniformed man's face when Marcus refused him service. It was not anger. It was disappointment. And somehow that seemed worse. Meanwhile, at the Royal Guard headquarters, preparations were already underway. Colonel Hamilton had made her decision, and when the colonel made a decision, things happened quickly. Orders went out to every member of the ceremonial regiment. Uniforms were pressed to perfection. Boots were polished until they gleamed. Ceremonial swords were cleaned and sharpened. Medals were arranged precisely on each chest. Captain Reynolds briefed his officers on the plan. Tomorrow morning at 0900 hours, the entire ceremonial regiment will assemble outside the Golden Harvest Cafe. We will be in full dress uniform with all honors. This is not a protest. This is not a demonstration. This is a statement about respect and recognition. What exactly are we doing, sir? One young lieutenant asked. We are going to show Mr. Chen exactly who he turned away. We are going to give him an education he will not forget. And we are going to do it with the dignity and discipline that our uniform represents. The officers nodded. They understood. This was not about revenge or punishment. It was about teaching a lesson in the most powerful way possible, by showing up in force and demonstrating exactly what the uniform meant. Lieutenant Morrison, when informed of the plan, felt conflicted. He had not wanted to cause trouble. He had simply been hungry and looking for breakfast. But he also understood why his superiors were taking this action. The uniform meant something. Service meant something. And sometimes civilians needed to be reminded of the sacrifices that men and women in uniform made every day. That night, as Marcus Chen locked up his cafe and went home to his comfortable apartment, he had no idea that tomorrow would be unlike any other day in his 15 years of business. He did not know that social media was already buzzing with posts about the incident, shared by customers who had witnessed the morning's confrontation. He did not know that local news stations had gotten wind of the story and were preparing coverage. He went to bed satisfied with his day, confident in his decisions and completely unaware that before 24 hours had passed, his cafe would be at the center of a situation that would force him to confront his own prejudices and assumptions. The Royal Guard was coming, and they were bringing a message that Marcus Chen was not prepared to receive. The weight of Colonel Hamilton's words settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. Outside, the assembled regiment remained perfectly still, their presence a silent testament to everything the colonel had just explained. The crowd of spectators continued to grow, with people recording on their phones and whispering among themselves. Marcus could see reporters interviewing onlookers, capturing reactions to the unprecedented display. Lieutenant Morrison, the colonel called toward the door. From within the ranks, James Morrison stepped forward and approached the cafe. He entered with the same quiet dignity he had shown the day before, his bearing straight, his expression neutral. When he saw Marcus, there was no anger in his eyes, only that same disappointment Marcus remembered. Lieutenant, the colonel said, this is Mr. Chen. He wishes to apologize to you. Marcus felt every eye in the cafe focused on him. His pride, which had seemed so important yesterday, now felt like a crushing burden. He took a step toward the young lieutenant and struggled to find adequate words. Lieutenant Morrison, Marcus began, his voice unsteady. I owe you a sincere apology. Yesterday I was ignorant and disrespectful. I judged you based on my own limited understanding instead of taking a moment to listen or learn. I dismissed your uniform, your service, and your dignity. For that I am truly sorry. James Morrison stood silent for a moment, then nodded once. I accept your apology, sir. The simple response somehow made Marcus feel worse. There was no anger to push against, no hostility to deflect, just quiet acceptance from someone who had been wronged and chose to respond with grace. If I may, Marcus continued, finding his voice growing stronger. I would be honored if you would allow me to serve you breakfast. No charge. It is the least I can do. The lieutenant glanced at his colonel, who gave a slight nod of permission. Thank you, James said. I would appreciate that. Colonel Hamilton turned back to Marcus. Mr. Chen, what happened here yesterday has become a lesson, whether you intended it or not. The question now is what kind of lesson it will be. Will it be a story about ignorance and prejudice, or will it be a story about growth and understanding? I want to do better. Marcus said earnestly. I want to make this right. Then I have a suggestion, the colonel replied. Your cafe has a sign on the door listing your dress code. I suggest you revise it. Make clear that military uniforms, police uniforms, firefighter uniforms, and all other service uniforms are not only permitted, but welcomed with respect and gratitude. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. I will do that today. Furthermore, the colonel continued, I suggest you take time to educate yourself about the various uniforms of service in this country. Learn what they represent. Understand the sacrifices behind them, so that you never again mistake duty for costume. I will, Marcus promised. I give you my word. The colonel studied him for another long moment, then gave a crisp nod. Very well. Lieutenant Morrison, please stay and have your breakfast. The rest of the regiment will return to duties. She turned and walked back out to the street. The crowd parted to let her through as she returned to the head of the formation. Her voice rang out clearly in the morning air. Regiment attention. About face? 122 guardsmen and guardswomen turned as one, their movements perfectly synchronized. Then, at the colonel's command, they began to march away, their boots creating that same thunderous rhythm that had announced their arrival. The crowd watched in respectful silence as the impressive display moved back down Merchant Street and gradually disappeared around the corner. As the sound of marching faded, the crowd began to disperse. The news crews packed up their equipment. Life on the street slowly returned to normal, though the buzz of conversation and the glow of phone screens indicated that what had just happened would not soon be forgotten. Inside the cafe, Marcus turned to Lieutenant Morrison, who now stood alone near the counter. Sarah and Tom had cautiously returned to their stations, watching to see what would happen next. Please, Marcus said, gesturing to a table by the window. Sit wherever you like. Sarah, Tom, let us prepare the best breakfast we can make. James Morrison selected a simple table and sat down with the upright posture that clearly came from years of discipline. Marcus brought him a menu, his hands still slightly shaking from the adrenaline of the past hour. The breakfast special, James said, just as he had requested the day before. And black coffee, please. Right away, Marcus replied. As Marcus worked behind the counter, he could not help but steal glances at the lieutenant. Now that he was actually looking, really looking, he could see so much he had missed before. The way the uniform fit spoke of regulation and standards maintained across decades. The medals were not random decorations, but carefully earned honors, each one telling a story. The insignia indicated rank and specialty, conveying information to those trained to read it. Sarah brought out the breakfast special: eggs, bacon, toast, and a side of fresh fruit, arranged carefully on the plate. Marcus delivered it personally along with the coffee. Thank you, James said politely. May I ask, Marcus ventured, what do the medals represent, if that is not too forward of me? James looked down at his chest, considering. This one is for overseas deployment. This one is for marksmanship qualification. This one is for meritorious service during the state visit last year. And this one, he touched a small silver medal, is for completing advanced security training. Each explanation drove home how wrong Marcus had been. These were not decorations. They were achievements. They represented skills developed, challenges overcome, service rendered. I have run this cafe for 15 years, Marcus said quietly. And I thought I had learned how to read people. But yesterday I did not read. I did not listen. I simply judged based on appearance. We all make mistakes, James replied, cutting into his eggs. What matters is what we do after we realize our error. Other customers had begun trickling into the cafe, drawn by the spectacle outside but staying for their regular breakfast routines. Marcus noticed them glancing at Lieutenant Morrison with curiosity and respect. A few nodded in greeting. An elderly man stopped by the table to shake the lieutenant's hand and thank him for his service. Sarah approached Marcus behind the counter. That was intense, she whispered. That was necessary, Marcus corrected. I needed to see what I was too stubborn to recognize. Tom joined them, keeping his voice low. The entire internet is going to know about this by lunchtime. He was right. Already, Marcus could see customers checking their phones and looking at him with expressions ranging from judgment to curiosity. The videos of the regiment marching down the street were being shared across social media platforms. Some posts praised the Royal Guard's response. Others criticized Marcus harshly, A few defended his right to maintain standards, though those voices were quickly drowned out by the majority. As Lieutenant Morrison finished his breakfast and prepared to leave, Marcus approached the table once more. "Lieutenant," he said, "I know I cannot undo yesterday, but I hope you will consider this cafe a place where you are always welcome, you and any of your fellow service members." "Any time, any day." James Morrison stood and offered his hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone trained to be strong yet controlled. "I appreciate that, Mr. Chen," James said, "and I hope this experience teaches others as well. There are many people who serve in many different ways. Not all of them wear uniforms as recognizable as mine, but they all deserve respect." With that wisdom delivered, the lieutenant walked to the door. He paused before leaving to nod respectfully to Sarah and Tom, then stepped out into the morning sunshine. Marcus watched him walk down the street, back toward his post at the Grand Imperial Hotel, where important people needed protecting. The cafe felt different somehow. Marcus could not quite explain it, but the atmosphere had shifted. Perhaps it was his own perception that had changed. He looked around at his establishment with new eyes, seeing not just the exposed brick and mismatched chairs, but the people who filled the space. Each one had a story. Each one deserved respect. By noon, the Golden Harvest Cafe had become the most talked-about location in the city. The videos of the Royal Guard Regiment marching down Merchant Street had gone viral, accumulating millions of views across various platforms. News stations were running stories about the incident, interviewing military experts, local residents, and even a few political commentators who saw broader implications in what had happened. Marcus found himself at the center of a storm he had never anticipated. His phone rang constantly with calls from reporters requesting interviews. His email inbox filled with messages ranging from supportive to viciously critical. Some people praised him for eventually apologizing. Many more condemned him for making the mistake in the first place. A few accused him of staging the entire incident for publicity, though anyone who knew Marcus understood how unlikely that was. The cafe itself experienced an unusual surge in customers. Some came out of genuine curiosity, wanting to see the place where such an extraordinary event had occurred. Others came to show support for Lieutenant Morrison and the Royal Guard, ordering coffee and leaving generous tips while making pointed comments about respect and service. A smaller number came to support Marcus, arguing that business owners had the right to enforce dress codes as they saw fit. Sarah and Tom worked twice as hard as usual, managing the unexpected crowd while fielding questions from curious customers. The atmosphere was tense, with various groups of people debating the incident in low, heated voices. Marcus did his best to keep things running smoothly, but he felt the weight of judgment pressing down on him from every direction. Around 2 in the afternoon, a woman in her 70s entered the cafe. She walked with a slight limp, aided by a wooden cane, and wore a simple dress with a small pin on her collar. Marcus noticed the pin depicted a flag and a pair of crossed military insignia. "Are you Marcus Chen?" she asked when she reached the counter. "I am," Marcus replied cautiously. "My name is Dorothy Morrison," she said. "James Morrison is my grandson." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Mrs. Morrison, She held up a hand to stop him. "I did not come here to make you feel worse. I came because I think there is something you should understand." She gestured to a quiet table in the corner, away from the bustling crowd. Marcus followed her, and they sat down across from each other. Dorothy Morrison folded her hands on the table, her weathered fingers showing the marks of age and hard work. "My husband wore that uniform," she began, her voice soft but clear. "He served for 32 years in the Royal Guard. He stood watch through 3 different administrations, survived 2 attempts on his life while protecting dignitaries, and earned more medals than I could count. When he died 5 years ago, they buried him in that uniform because it represented everything he believed in." Marcus listened silently, feeling the weight of her words. "When James told me what happened yesterday," Dorothy continued, "my first reaction was anger. How dare someone dismiss what that uniform means? How dare they treat my grandson, who has worked so hard to follow in his grandfather's footsteps, like he was playing dress-up?" "I am so sorry," Marcus said quietly. "But then," Dorothy said, "I watched the videos this morning. I saw the regiment marching down the street. I saw Colonel Hamilton speaking to you. And I saw something else. I saw a man who realized he had made a mistake and was trying to make it right." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. That matters, Mr. Chen. Acknowledging a mistake and working to correct it matters more than you might think. Marcus felt tears threatening again. I have been getting messages all day. Some people are calling me terrible names. Others are saying I should close my business. I know I was wrong, but I never imagined it would become this big. Dorothy nodded knowingly. The world moves fast now with all these cameras and internet sites. One mistake can follow a person forever, but here's what I want you to understand. My grandson did not want this attention. He just wanted breakfast, and he certainly did not want to ruin your life or your business. He was so polite, Marcus remembered. Even when I refused him, he stayed calm and respectful. That should have told me something about his character. That is what the uniform teaches, Dorothy explained. Discipline, respect, composure under pressure. My husband used to say that anyone can be polite when things go their way. The true test of character is how you behave when you are treated unfairly. She paused to look around the cafe, taking in the busy scene. You have built something nice here. 15 years, James told me. That is a long time to run a business. You must have done many things right. I thought I had, Marcus admitted. I thought my standards were about maintaining quality and atmosphere. But yesterday showed me that some of my standards were really just prejudices dressed up as principles. Dorothy smiled slightly. That is a hard thing to admit. Most people never get there. They defend their mistakes forever rather than face the truth about themselves. A young couple at a nearby table was openly watching their conversation, clearly trying to overhear. Marcus noticed and felt self-conscious, but Dorothy seemed unbothered. Mrs. Morrison, Marcus said, would you allow me to prepare something for you? Coffee, lunch, anything you would like. No charge. She considered for a moment, then nodded. A cup of tea would be lovely, and perhaps one of those pastries in your display case. Marcus signaled to Sarah, who quickly prepared a pot of tea and selected the best pastry available. When it arrived at the table, Dorothy examined it with an appreciative eye. My husband and I used to own a small restaurant, she said, stirring honey into her tea. Nothing fancy, just good home cooking. We ran it for 25 years before his health forced us to sell. So I understand the pride you take in your establishment. What made you successful? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. We treated everyone the same, Dorothy replied simply. Rich or poor, local or tourist, dressed in a suit or dressed in work clothes. Everyone got the same quality food and the same level of respect. We figured people would remember how we made them feel more than anything else. Her words struck Marcus deeply. He had been so focused on creating the right atmosphere, attracting the right clientele, maintaining the right image. But in doing so, he had forgotten the most basic principle of hospitality. You are right, he said. I lost sight of what really matters. Dorothy took a sip of her tea and smiled. The good news is that you can find your way back. It is not too late. They talked for another hour, with Dorothy sharing stories about her husband's service, the challenges and rewards of military life, and the values that the uniform represented. She spoke about nights when her husband came home exhausted from standing watch for 12 hours straight, but still insisted on helping their young son with homework. She described ceremonies where fallen comrades were honored, and the solemn weight of understanding that any day could bring that same fate. The uniform is not worn for glory, Dorothy explained. Most of the time, service is boring, repetitive work. Standing in one spot for hours, following the same protocols day after day. It is about reliability, dedication, and putting duty before personal comfort. Marcus absorbed every word, beginning to understand the depth of what he had dismissed so casually. The uniform represented not just the individual wearing it, but generations of service, countless hours of sacrifice, and a commitment to something larger than oneself. When Dorothy finally prepared to leave, she stood with some difficulty, leaning on her cane. Marcus helped her steady herself, then walked her to the door. Thank you for coming, he said sincerely. You did not have to, but I am grateful you did. I came because I wanted you to see the person behind the uniform, Dorothy replied. James is not just a guardsman. He is a grandson, a friend, a person who loves old movies and terrible jokes. The uniform is part of him, but it does not define everything about him. I understand, Marcus said. Or at least I am beginning to. Dorothy patted his arm gently. That is all any of us can do. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember that everyone who walks through that door has a story you do not know. After she left, Marcus stood at the door for several minutes, watching the street outside. The afternoon crowd was beginning to thin. Some customers were leaving while others lingered over coffee and conversation. He could still see people occasionally taking photos of the cafe exterior, marking the spot where the Royal Guard had made their statement. Tom approached with the day's financial report. "We have had 3 times our normal lunch business," he said. "But I do not know if that is something to celebrate." "No," Marcus agreed. "This is not the kind of success I want." Sarah joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Marcus, I have been thinking. Maybe we should do something more. Something beyond just changing the dress code policy." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "What if we offered a discount to anyone in uniform? Military, police, firefighters, paramedics, all of them. It could be our way of showing appreciation, not just apologizing for one mistake." Marcus considered the suggestion. It felt right, like a concrete action that moved beyond words and into genuine change. "Yes," he decided. "Let us do that. 20% discount for anyone in a service uniform, and we will make it permanent." "I will make a sign for the window," Tom volunteered. As the afternoon wore on, Marcu. The following week brought unexpected challenges and surprising developments for Marcus and the Golden Harvest Cafe. The viral videos and news coverage had made the establishment infamous, transforming it from a quiet neighborhood spot into a symbol of both prejudice and redemption, depending on who was telling the story. On Thursday morning, Marcus arrived to find graffiti spray-painted across his front window. The words were harsh and accusatory, calling him names that made his stomach turn. He spent 2 hours scrubbing the glass before opening, his hands raw from the effort and his heart heavy with the realization that some people would never forgive him. But that same afternoon, a group of veterans arrived wearing jackets covered in patches from various military units. Their leader, a grizzled man in his 60s with a prosthetic leg, approached Marcus directly. "We heard what happened here," the veteran said, his voice gruff. "And we heard about your apology and the new policy. We wanted to see for ourselves if you meant it." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I meant every word. Please sit down. Your meals are on the house today." The veteran studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We will pay for our meals, but we appreciate the gesture. Actions speak louder than words, son. Let us see if your actions match up." Over the next hour, Marcus and his staff served the group of veterans with extra care and attention. He sat with them when the cafe was less busy, listening to their stories about service, sacrifice, and the bonds formed in uniform. They did not lecture or criticize. They simply shared their experiences, and in doing so gave Marcus a deeper understanding of what service truly meant. When they left, the veteran who had spoken first shook Marcus's hand firmly. "You are learning," he said. "Keep learning." That weekend, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He contacted Colonel Hamilton's office and requested a meeting. To his amazement, she agreed to see him on Monday afternoon at the Royal Guard headquarters. The building was impressive, a historic structure with marble columns and flags flying outside. Marcus felt intimidated as he was escorted through security and led down corridors lined with photographs of guardsmen and guardswomen spanning generations. The images showed young faces full of determination, older faces marked by experience, and memorial portraits of those who had fallen in service. Colonel Hamilton's office was spartanly decorated but immaculate. Awards and commendations lined one wall. A large window overlooked the parade grounds where guardsmen were conducting training exercises. "Mr. Chen," the colonel greeted him, gesturing to a chair. "I was surprised to receive your request for a meeting." "I wanted to thank you in person," Marcus said, settling into the chair, "and to ask if there is anything more I can do to make amends." The colonel studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. "Why do you feel you need to do more?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Because changing a sign on my door is not enough. Because offering a discount feels token. I want to understand what I failed to see before, and I want to use my mistake to create something positive." "That is an admirable goal," the colonel said. "What did you have in mind?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Marcus admitted. "I do not know enough about military service or the challenges that service members face. But I want to learn, and I want my cafe to be a place that genuinely honors service, not just pays lip service to it." Colonel Hamilton leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Most people in your situation would have just laid low and waited for the attention to fade. The fact that you are here suggests you're serious about change. I am, Marcus confirmed. The colonel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds. Do you know what one of the biggest challenges is for young service members? Isolation. They are often stationed far from home, working long hours, living on modest pay. Places where they feel welcomed and appreciated become important to them. She turned back to face Marcus. If you truly want to honor service, make your cafe a place where uniformed personnel feel not just accepted but valued. Not because you are offering them discounts, but because you have taken the time to understand and respect what they do. How do I do that? Marcus asked. Start by educating yourself, the colonel replied. Learn about the different branches of service, the various uniforms, and what they signify. Understand the sacrifices involved in military life. Then, and this is important, do not make a big show of it. Do not plaster your cafe with flags and patriotic slogans to prove you have changed. Just treat service members with genuine respect when they come through your door. Marcus nodded, absorbing her advice. Would it be possible for me to visit here sometimes? To learn more directly? The colonel raised her eyebrows. You want to visit a military facility? If it is allowed, Marcus said. I learn better by seeing and experiencing than by reading, and I think meeting more service members, understanding their daily lives, would help me truly appreciate what the uniform represents. Colonel Hamilton considered his request. That is unusual but not impossible. I could arrange for you to attend a few educational sessions and perhaps observe some training. Under proper supervision, of course. I would be grateful for any opportunity to learn, Marcus said sincerely. They talked for another 30 minutes, with the colonel explaining various aspects of military service and the values that underpinned it. She was frank about both the honor and the difficulties, painting a realistic picture that went beyond simple hero worship or blind patriotism. Service is not perfect, she told him. We are all human and we make mistakes. But the uniform represents our commitment to try, to show up every day and do our duty regardless of recognition or reward. When Marcus left the headquarters, he felt changed by the conversation. The colonel had not shamed him or lectured him. She had simply shared truth, and that truth was more powerful than any criticism could have been. True to her word, Colonel Hamilton arranged for Marcus to attend several educational sessions over the following weeks. He learned about military rank structure, the history of various uniforms, and the significance of medals and insignia. He attended a ceremony honoring guardsmen who had completed advanced training, watching as they received recognition for months of hard work and dedication. Most impactfully, he spent a day shadowing Lieutenant James Morrison during a regular shift. He saw the young man stand at his post for hours without break, maintaining perfect posture and alertness despite the physical strain. He witnessed the professionalism with which James handled various situations, from directing lost tourists to responding to a minor security incident. During a brief lunch break, Marcus and James talked more casually. I was angry at first, James admitted. Not going to lie about that. Being dismissed felt personal, even though I knew it was not really about me. It was about my ignorance, Marcus said. I am sorry you had to be the one to experience it. But you know what? James continued. What happened ended up creating conversations. People started talking about service, about respect, about how we treat each other. Some good came from it. That does not excuse what I did, Marcus protested. No, James agreed, but it gives it meaning. You can let a mistake define you, or you can let it teach you. You seem to be choosing the second option. Back at the cafe, Marcus implemented changes beyond the discount policy. He created a small display near the entrance with information about different service branches and what their uniforms looked like. He made sure his staff understood the basics of military courtesy. Most importantly, he worked on changing his own perspective, training himself to see people first and uniforms second. The cafe slowly regained its regular rhythm, though it attracted a different mix of customers now. Word had spread in military circles that the Golden Harvest had become genuinely welcoming to service members. Officers would stop in for coffee before shifts. Veterans groups held informal gatherings at the tables. Off-duty guardsmen brought their families for breakfast. Sarah noticed the change and commented on it one afternoon. It feels different in here now. More diverse somehow. More real. It is what it should have been all along, Marcus replied. I was so focused on creating a specific atmosphere that I forgot the best atmosphere comes from genuine hospitality. Not everyone supported the changes. Some of Marcus's longtime customers complained that the cafe had become too political or too military. A few stopped coming altogether, uncomfortable with the new direction. Marcus felt the loss of their business, but he did not waver. Some things mattered more than profits. 6 months after the incident that had changed everything, the Golden Harvest Cafe had evolved into something Marcus never anticipated. The small establishment had become known throughout the city, not for viral videos or controversy, but as a genuine community hub where service and civilian worlds intersected comfortably. On this particular morning, Marcus arrived as usual at 6 o'clock to find someone waiting outside his door. It was Lieutenant James Morrison, now promoted to Captain Morrison, wearing his dress uniform and holding a small package. "Captain Morrison," Marcus greeted him warmly, unlocking the door. "This is a surprise. Congratulations on your promotion." "Thank you," James replied, following Marcus inside. "I wanted to stop by before the day got busy. I have something for you." He handed Marcus the package, which was surprisingly heavy for its size. Marcus unwrapped it carefully to reveal a framed photograph. The image showed the Royal Guard Regiment standing at attention outside the cafe on that fateful Wednesday morning. But what made it special was the inscription at the bottom, signed by Colonel Hamilton and dozens of guardsmen. "To Marcus Chen and the Golden Harvest Cafe. May we all have the courage to recognize our mistakes and the wisdom to learn from them. With respect and appreciation." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he read the words. I do not know what to say." "You turned a bad situation into something meaningful," James said. "That deserves recognition." "I made a terrible mistake," Marcus corrected. "You and your regiment taught me a lesson I desperately needed to learn." "And you actually learned it," James pointed out. "That is rarer than you might think. Most people just defend their actions and move on. You chose to change." They talked while Marcus prepared coffee, discussing James's new responsibilities as a captain and the ongoing state visit that kept the Royal Guard especially busy. The conversation was easy now, built on months of gradual friendship formed through James's regular visits to the cafe. As more customers began arriving, Marcus hung the framed photograph on the wall near the entrance where everyone could see it. It sparked immediate interest, with several people asking about the story behind it. Marcus told the truth each time, neither hiding his mistake nor glorifying his redemption, just honest acknowledgement of what had happened and what he had learned. Sarah arrived and immediately noticed the new addition. "That is going to start conversations," she observed. "Good," Marcus replied. "Conversations are how we learn." Throughout the morning, the cafe filled with its now typical mix of customers. A table of police officers sat near the window, enjoying breakfast before their shift. A group of firefighters occupied the corner, loudly joking about something that had happened at the station. Several veterans in civilian clothes were scattered throughout the room, some alone with newspapers, others chatting with friends. But there were also business professionals, tourists, students with laptops, and young families with small children. The cafe had become diverse in ways Marcus had never imagined when he first opened 15 years ago. And that diversity made it richer, more interesting, more alive. Around 10 o'clock, Dorothy Morrison arrived with another elderly woman. Marcus greeted her with a warm hug, which had become their custom. "Marcus, this is my friend Helen," Dorothy introduced. "Her son serves in the Navy. I have been telling her about your cafe." "Any friend of Mrs. Morrison's is welcome here," Marcus said, leading them to a comfortable table. "What can I get for you, ladies?" As he prepared their tea and pastries, Marcus reflected on how much Dorothy had become part of his life. She visited at least twice a week, always with stories about her late husband or updates about James. Through her, Marcus had learned so much about military families, the sacrifices they made, and the unique challenges they faced. Tom was working the register when a young woman in an army uniform approached to order. She looked nervous, glancing around as if unsure she belonged. Tom smiled warmly. "Welcome to the Golden Harvest," he said. "First time here?" "Yes," she replied. "I heard this place was friendly to military. I am new to the base and do not know the area well yet." "You heard right," Tom assured her. "And by the way, you get 20% off in uniform." "What can I get for you?" As Tom took her order, Marcus watched from across the cafe. He felt proud of his staff who had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. They had learned alongside him, asking questions, showing curiosity about the different uniforms they encountered, treating each service member with genuine respect. The young soldier found a seat at the bar counter, and soon Sarah was chatting with her about the best places to eat in the neighborhood. The conversation flowed naturally, no different from how Sarah would talk to any other customer. That was the point, Marcus realized. Respect did not mean making a big fuss or treating people differently. It meant recognizing their humanity and their service without either ignoring or overemphasizing it. Around noon, a news reporter Marcus recognized entered the cafe. She had covered the original incident 6 months ago, and her report had been particularly harsh. Marcus felt his defenses rising but forced himself to remain calm. "Mr. Chen," the reporter said, approaching the counter, "I would like to do a follow-up story if you are willing." Marcus hesitated. "What kind of story?" "An honest one," she replied. "6 months ago I reported on your mistake. But I have been hearing things about how much has changed here. I think people deserve to know the rest of the story." Marcus considered her request. Part of him wanted to avoid more media attention, but another part recognized that sharing his journey might help others avoid similar mistakes. "All right," he agreed, "but I want to be clear about something. This is not about me becoming some kind of hero. I made a serious error in judgment, and I am still working to be better." "That is exactly the story I want to tell," the reporter said. Over the next hour, she interviewed Marcus, his staff, and several customers, including Dorothy Morrison and a group of veterans who had become regulars. She took photos of the framed picture, the discount policy sign, and the diverse crowd filling the cafe. When the story aired later that week, it was balanced and thoughtful. It acknowledged Marcus's initial mistake but focused on the transformation that had followed. It featured interviews with service members talking about how the cafe made them feel welcomed and valued. It explored the broader question of how civilians and military communities could better understand each other. The response was largely positive, though Marcus still received occasional critical messages from people who believed he should face harsher consequences. He had learned to accept that not everyone would forgive him, and that was okay. He was not seeking absolution, just the opportunity to do better moving forward. One afternoon in late autumn, Colonel Hamilton made an unannounced visit to the cafe. Marcus was surprised to see her in civilian clothes rather than her uniform. "Colonel," he greeted her, "please sit down. What can I get for you?" "Just coffee," she said, settling into a chair. "And I am off duty, so you can call me Margaret." They talked casually about the cafe, the changes Marcus had made, and how things were progressing. Eventually, Margaret got to the purpose of her visit. "The Royal Guard is organizing a community outreach program," she explained. "We want to build better connections between military and civilian communities. I was hoping you might be willing to participate, perhaps hosting some events here that bring people together." Marcus felt honored by the request. "I would be happy to help in any way I can." "Good," Margaret said, "because you have created something valuable here. This cafe has become a bridge, and bridges are important." They discussed possibilities, from hosting informal gatherings where service members and civilians could interact, to educational sessions about military life, to support groups for military families. The ideas flowed easily, built on the foundation of trust and respect that had developed over months. As evening approached and the cafe prepared to close, Marcus stood at his window looking out at the street. He thought about the young man in a navy blue uniform who had walked through his door 6 months ago, seeking nothing more than breakfast. He thought about his own arrogance and ignorance, the painful lesson he had learned, and the journey of growth that had followed. The framed photograph on the wall caught his eye. 123 uniformed figures standing at attention, delivering a silent message about respect, service, and dignity. It had been a moment of profound humiliation, but also a moment of profound awakening. Sarah and Tom were finishing their closing tasks, joking with each other as they wiped down tables and swept floors. They had become more than just employees. They were partners in creating the kind of place Marcus now wanted the cafe to be. "You know," Tom said, putting away the broom, "I was scared when all this happened. I thought the cafe might close. But looking around now, I think we are better than we were before." "We are," Marcus agreed. "Sometimes it takes getting knocked down to see what you have been missing." As they locked up for the night, Marcus took one last look at the cafe. The exposed brick walls and mismatched chairs remained the same, but everything else had changed. The atmosphere was warmer, more inclusive, more genuine. The customer base was diverse and interesting. And most importantly, Marcus himself had changed, shedding prejudices he had not.